Why do some organizations constantly struggle with turnover while others seem to keep great people for years? It's not because they pay the most. It's not because they offer the best perks. And it's not because they never experience stress. You see, high retention organizations are intentional about protecting capacity, building trust, and creating sustainable workplaces. This happens because employees don't stay because work is easy. Employees stay because the environment makes hard work sustainable. And I've watched this multiple times when cultures shift. I've started at companies where the culture is amazing. People love showing up to work. It's a positive environment. People are connecting. And then things become very negative and everybody hides in their office and it's cynical. And it's not just because things change financially, it's because of what the organization shifted their focus to. They stopped creating an environment where people were supported. So it's about the culture and how people feel treated. So one of the things we're going to talk about today is what I call the workforce stability formula. So we've talked about healthy leadership, it's about healthy culture, and now sustainable systems because this all helps with workforce stability. So we've talked a little bit about healthy leaders and healthy cultures in previous videos. And if you haven't watched those, I encourage you to go watch the previous 3 videos in this series. And as we talk about retention today, I want you to think beyond turnover numbers. I want you to ask yourself, are the employees staying because they're engaged or because they're waiting for something else? Are managers thriving or barely surviving? And if retention is becoming a challenge, schedule a workforce strategy consultation. It'll be linked below. In this conversation, it's just a leadership conversation and a workforce diagnostic session where we will talk about strategic planning, and it is free to you. But during these consultations, we often discover that retention problems begin long before employees submit their resignation. And working within cultures, I've watched it happen time and again. We have to look at that first, right? It's not when they resign, it always happens before. And so as I've been sharing this story about working at a psychiatric hospital and we turned it around, right? The initial situation, staffing shortages, admission challenges, high operational stress, and recruitment being increasingly difficult, right? Leadership was focusing on hiring more, filling vacancies, filling beds, and solving turnover through recruitment. But what I discovered and what leadership joined me on was that retention was a bigger issue than recruitment, right? Because once leadership focused on stability, communication, team cohesion, and sustainable systems, the workforce improved, right? The health of the culture improved. We have to focus on these underlying aspects. It's not just about retention. It's not just about recruitment, right? We want to retain good employees. And I don't think leaders pay attention to that sometimes. I think they're just like, oh, it's just another person, but it costs more. Because the lessons I've learned is that great organizations don't just attract talent, they create reasons for talent to stay. And that's exactly what high retention organizations understand. You see, most organizations get it wrong about retention. They often assume that more money solves turnover, or better benefits solves turnover, or more hiring solves turnover. And yes, money is important for employees, especially in today's economy, but it is not the primary driver for why people stay. Most employees leave environments, not the job itself. Employees leave because they're burnt out. They think leadership, it's poor leadership. They don't see a leader they can follow. They don't feel supported. They leave because expectations are not clear and they're chronically overwhelmed. You see, retention is often a culture issue diagnosed as a staffing issue. But what high retention organizations do differently is they create clarity. So they create clarity in their expectations, in identifying what's a priority and clarity in how they communicate things to employees, where there is no question left of what is expected and what those timelines look like. These organizations, they create trust, and they create trust through having leaders who are consistent by providing a psychologically safe environment and being transparent with employees. And remember, transparency isn't about sharing every detail that's potentially coming, but it's sharing some of what's coming, kind of general concepts. In these organizations, employees feel supported, right? So leaders create support, organizations create support. And what that means is leaders are accessible and employees know what that accessibility looks like. They provide opportunities for professional development for people to move up the ladder or grow their skills. They support teams connecting, right? I've seen teams who love getting together for barbecues or having a summer picnic fun day together. Those are important. They help build morale and connection, but it's not the only thing that fixes burnout. These organizations also create sustainability, which means realistic workloads. I've seen workloads double in the last 10 years that are not sustainable. Sustainability also comes with providing recovery opportunities, which means as leaders, you don't make people feel bad for taking their time off. You reward them for taking that time off because that means they are trying to stay healthy to keep doing the job. Creating sustainability also means long-term thinking, right? Not just one crisis situation in the moment, but it's long-term. And managers who protect metrics, we have to pay attention to that, right? Because we have to protect managers before we protect metrics. And this matters because managers shape employee experience. So high retention organizations are invested in their manager development, not just the metrics. They support leadership capacity and they address manager burnout. And this is where I have seen things change when leadership is 100% focused on the finances and the metrics and not the humanness behind the job. They lose their culture. But when you can stay focused on the human doing the job, invest in their development, support the leadership capacity, and this falls down to employees, it makes a world of difference on the culture. You see, organizations who have low retention, they promote managers. They pay attention to how much they overload managers because you can't expect managers to absorb all of the organizational pressure. It doesn't work because burned out managers create turnover. And so how do we use the sustainable workforce method to build retention? We start with that organizational assessment, right? Where we identify the burnout risks and the things driving turnover. Because if you don't know what's going on under the surface in your organization, you can't change it for the long term. We focus on aligning expectations of leadership and the organization and improving the systems that people work within. We also focus on the team cohesion, so improving communication and conflict resolution and building trust among the team again. And then the fourth aspect, right, we work on that workforce resilience where we help individual employees learn on an individual level how to prevent burnout for themselves, how to create sustainable performance practices, and are you working on leadership development, working to build your employees into leaders? Because the truth is everybody is a leader, whether they're a leader in an organization or just leading in their own life. These are all things that are important to pay attention to. And remember that retention is not an event, it's the outcome of intentional leadership and cultural design. But there is a financial impact of workforce stability. And let's look at the benefits of this because when you can retain employees, you reduce your recruitment costs. You lower those onboarding expenses and the time spent training a new employee. You'll have better productivity because people want to be at work, and there's higher morale, which brings a stronger culture. And so workforce stability isn't just an HR metric, it's a business performance metric. And it is one that needs to be tracked and assessed. And if you're struggling with turnover, burnout, disengagement, or leadership strain, the answer may not be hiring faster. But if you're wondering how to do this, schedule a workforce strategy consultation. It'll be linked below. And during this session, we'll review your workforce challenges, identify any burnout risks you might be noticing or experiencing. We will explore cultural barriers and discuss opportunities for improvement, because this is the first step organizations take before implementing the sustainable workforce method. And so just to review, we've had 4 videos so far in this month's series where we've explored the hidden costs of burnout, why burned out teams stop caring, leadership behaviors that shape culture, and what high retention organizations do differently. And so if you've not caught up on all of those, I encourage you to subscribe and go back and watch those, because they all connect together. Because sustainable workplaces don't happen by accident, they're designed. So if this resonated with you, I do encourage you to subscribe. Next month, we're going to talk more specifically about psychology of stress and burnout, where we'll look at the burnout cycle nobody talks about, why your brain gets stuck in survival mode, how chronic stress changes your thinking, and the identity loss that happens during burnout. This is more specific to the individual, the humanness behind the job, but it all connects. So before we can solve burnout, we need to understand what's happening inside the brain and body. And so I'll leave you with high retention organizations aren't lucky. They're intentionally creating environments where people can perform, grow, and contribute without sacrificing their well-being. When leaders focus on workforce stability, instead of simply replacing employees, everything changes. So if you'd like to identify the hidden factors impacting retention in your organization, schedule a workforce consultation today.